Hello, everybody, and thank you for having us back at DAS. We were speaking about the same topic and almost saying the same things, only we hope with a little bit of a slant at the last DAS in America. And we're really, really happy to be part of this one in Europe because it is our home turf. The vast majority of PeopleNotTech is based in the UK. Did I say in Europe, our home turf? That's a little bit contentious of a topic. But in any case, both Ffion and I are really excited. We're not going to be giving you a long intro about who we are because you can so easily find this information on LinkedIn. Suffice it to say that we are in love with Agile, in love with DevOps, and are living and breathing psychological safety. So with that said, let's just get straight into the topic. And the topic, as I said, is essentially the same one that we have discussed before. Basically looking at the idea of psychological safety, both from the point of view of good behaviors and from the point of view of negative behaviors, in particular when it comes to impression management and the way that reflects in high-performing teams. So, as I said, we're going to be giving you some of the new stuff and some of the stuff that we discussed before, only would like you to stick with us so that we get to those bits of news.
Absolutely. So we know that in this community, in the DevOps community, and that there's going to be a ton of people who really already know quite a bit about psychological safety, but we wanted to put in at the beginning some of the background. So first of all, the term psychological safety has been around since about the 90s. This quote here you can see from William Kahn. That piece of work and the research around psychological safety has really been brought to the public conscious by the work of Professor Dr. Amy Edmondson, the Harvard Professor of Leadership. So if you haven't heard of her, go and read her books. She's the place to start. But then psychological safety has been defined by her as a shared belief that the team and the environment is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. As we've already said, we've taken that to heart and made it the core of our work here at PeopleNotTech. And we've come up with our own definition based on what we see in teams that have really high levels of psychological safety. And that is to say that a psychologically safe team is one that feels like it moves mountains together, thinking back to the time when you made magic with the team, when you were debated, you were vulnerable and learning, and getting stuff done. That was what we see to be psychologically safe. And then we boiled it down to something even more simple and human and fundamental, really. And that's looking at this idea of team equals family. And when we talk to people about that, and when we say think back to the last time you were in a team where it felt like family, that's when people can really think of and hook into a time when they felt psychologically safe in a team. So that's how we have found it most impactful and useful to talk to people about psychologically safe teams.
Right, and as Ffion was saying, the concept in itself is not new. It has been going around for quite some time. In fact, I think the very first mention of the concept may have dated back to the 60s, if I remember correctly, but the term hasn't come into consciousness until the 90s, and then obviously with the work of Professor Dr. Amy Edmondson. In terms of Professor Dr. Amy Edmondson, I'm sure no one listening to this is unfamiliar with her work, but if at all you haven't read it, please read The Fearless Organization, please read Teaming. At the very least, those two books will give you a lot better of a perspective. And obviously, everybody listening to us would have at least read the project and is very familiar with how Jean and collaborators are defining psychological safety. But obviously, we say this over and over again, psychological safety hasn't really gotten to become part of the general idea of the business world until Project Aristotle came back with their findings. And we're going to be talking a little bit about it from here on, but what matters is that there was this, if you wish, gap between when academia woke up to the importance of dynamic in teams and of teams making this magic together, and that time that the business world has woken up to it. So in terms of the Project Aristotle, This has been a very successful slide at the other DAOs, and we were very pleased to see that people have liked to see all this information in one. I'm sure it wasn't news to anybody, but what this says is that we are practically looking at the biggest set of data that there is in terms of a technology company that has asked the right questions of their people. So what Google's Project Iceberg was, in a nutshell, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially centered around the question of what is it that makes our team super performant? How do we get high performance in teams? What makes our team be magical and run fast? And they have run this study with looking at over 100 variables, 180 teams, 50,000 people have been surveyed. That is immense as compared to everybody else. And it has been over a quite sizable period of time, those 4 years. And all the data has come back to essentially point to, first and foremost, psychological safety. Secondly, whether or not a team has a degree of dependability, whether or not the team has inbuilt structure and clarity, if they have meaning, if they have impact. Obviously, all of these mean different things to different people. And there has been, there have been voices that have been slightly critical of what does dependability really mean? What does it mean outside of Google? How do we get more meaning? How do we get more impact? What does structure and clarity mean in different organizations? All of those things are debatable. What isn't debatable, though, is what does psychological safety really mean in this context? And to double down on how important it is, what you're looking at is something that I'm sure most of you have seen before, which is essentially one of the many diagrams in the state